The Ankler is supported by FX's Say Nothing. Based on the book by Patrick Rodden Keefe, the Peabody Award-winning series is a story of murder and memory in Northern Ireland during the Troubles. Following Dolores and Marianne Price, it explores the extremes some people will go to in the name of their beliefs and how a deeply divided society can suddenly tip over into armed conflict. Time calls Say Nothing exceptional, an urgently timely work of political art. Awards eligible in all limited categories. Now streaming on Hulu. Hi, everyone, and welcome to the first of a series of special weekend episodes, all focused on conversation with some of the year's most fascinating Emmy contenders as Phase 1 Emmy voting gets ready to start in June. Today, I've got a conversation I had with Amir Questlove Thompson, who, in addition to being the band leader of The Roots and a very famous musician, is also the Oscar-winning documentarian behind 2021's Summer of Soul. And earlier this year, he returned to the Sundance Film Festival with his second feature-length documentary, Sly Lives, a.k.a. The Burden of Black Genius. It is the story of the hugely influential band Sly and the Family Stone, but it also goes even bigger than that, looking at the struggles of the band's leader, Sly Stone, within the context of the really unique challenges that face Black artists. Questlove has been open about the struggles he himself faced after winning the Oscar for Summer of Soul, and he's really exactly the right person to have these frank, open conversations with other musicians like D'Angelo and Andre 3000, who weigh in on what he calls the burden of Black genius. As Questlove tells me, he was hugely influenced by Sly and the Family Stone, like so many other musicians have been, but then had this moment of realizing that he could thread their story with these larger questions that he had about Black genius. And he also told me why Sly himself is not a voice in the film. We talk about why he keeps so busy. In addition to Sly Lives, Questlove also directed the TV special Ladies and Gentlemen, 50 Years of SNL Music, which is also exceptional. There is so much to talk about with someone who has done as much as Amir Thompson, so this is my attempt to get into at least some of it. Let's hear my conversation with the director of Sly Lives, The Burden of Black Genius, Amir Questlove Thompson. So I've read some of the other interviews you've done and about how, this idea about the burden of Black genius was something that you had wanted to pair with the story of Sly. But I wasn't clear about which thought came to you first. Was it to do Sly, or was this idea of the burden of genius something that had been with you for a long time? And at what point those two things kind of matched together for you? If that had been with you, those things had been together, or if it was only when you started the film that they matched up?
Yeah, they kind of came in hand. We were mid-2020, not mid-2020. This was like around maybe July or August of doing Summer of Soul. Back when we didn't even have the title Summer of Soul. It was still like the Black Woodstock doc or whatever we were going to call it. The working title was before it landed on Summer of Soul. And we were editing the Sly and the Family Stone performance, and I was telling my producers and my editor, I was like, dude, this is just a rehearsal for Woodstock in 10 days. Sly does not know in 10 days everything in his life is going to turn upside down. Like, imagine watching someone, not even knowing it's one thing to watch someone like on the last week of their life, but sort of like the last week of the normal precipice of life as you knew it, and nothing's going to be the same after that. Everything's going to change. And I will say in less than 12 hours, I got a call from Common, of all people, congratulating me on the Black Woodstock project. I guess maybe that month we announced that I was doing it. Even though
how often does he call you? Is this an out of the blue thing?
Well, no. I mean, I produced like 3 of his records, but
yeah, right now,
kind of in our new movie commonality roles, it was a weird phone call, but he called to congratulate me on it, and he's like, "Yo, by the way, I own the life rights to Sly and the Family Stone. We've been trying to get their documentary done for the last 4 years. Would you be at all interested in taking a shot at this?" And I was like, what? I was like, I literally was just talking about that. I got paranoid because I was like, okay, Alexia is definitely the FBI for sure, because there's no way that this just came to you like coincidentally. And we made an agreement to do Sly. Yeah, like I think
Before you even
August,
finished Summer of Soul.
before we finished Summer of Soul, and then maybe 5 weeks after we won Sundance for Summer of Soul, that's when Lauren Michaels put SNL 50 in my hands. So
Yeah.
kind of both these, I think, Common moved on Faith, but I think pretty much with any other subsequent projects I've gotten, people were just waiting for the green light, the thumbs up from seeing what happens with Summer of Soul. Like
Sure.
after Sundance, then it was sort of like an avalanche of everything started coming down, and it was like the opposite of Oprah. Like, you get a car, you get a car. It's like, you get this project and that project and that project.
You get some work.
Project. Right, exactly. You get some work. And yeah, even now, I'm mid Earth, Wind, and Fire right now. So
Yeah. Yeah. I think you had talked about how the success of Summer of Soul made kind of a lot of the Sly movie feel really personal. The idea of hitting the success and what happens to you and how successes can be scarier than failure, which I think is the first thing you say in the interviews in there. So
yeah.
was it a different film before all of that happened? Like, were you approaching it as kind of a more straightforward story about Sly and the Family Stone before that?
So the thing is, the very first memory I ever had in life is Sly and the Family Stone. So anyone of age, like if you talk to any of the Jacksons, and I ask them this all the time because, like, Sly sort of invented black psychedelia, like the idea of wearing anything but a suit on stage, the idea of wearing your afro, the idea of looking primitive, exotic. That comes from Sly. And so, the Jackson 5 were basically Motown's answer to, like, we'll have five brothers looking like the Black Panthers but dressing crazy. That came from Sly. And I asked them all the time, like, what was it like seeing them between the ages of 10 and 15? And, they all have varied answers about how hopeful and joyful Sly made them. But in my particular case, my very first memory in life is Sly associated. And that is, I was getting my hair shampooed in the bathtub upstairs, my mother and my sister. I had a massive afro. And because I didn't know that you should keep your eyes closed when you're getting your hair washed, my eyes opened and it stung. And of course, I had a knee-jerk reaction, which then caused a series of bathroom cleansers that were connected to the bathtub to fall down and somewhat disperse. And again, I don't have my eyes closed because I'm only 2 years old. Like, no one said, keep your eyes closed at no cost. Like, a 2-year-old doesn't know that.
Yeah.
And so now the cleanser is in my eyes and the soap is in my eyes. And it's as if I got stabbed 1 trillion times. Mm-hmm. So cut to me laying on the ground. Now, how I got downstairs to the living room in front of the stereo, I don't know. But
Yeah.
all I remember was my mother, my aunt, my sister, my father pinning me to the floor wrestling style, and kind of in the Stanley Kubrick film where he forces the eyes open.
Clockwork Orange, yeah.
Yeah, and in kind of a Clockwork Orange way, my father taking a gallon of like water and flushing my eyes open. Meanwhile, the most darkest song of There's a Riot Going On is playing, a song called Just Like a Baby, in which Sly is sort of like mowing. I mean, it's like a junkie nodding off. And
Yeah.
yeah, I will never, like, I was just laying there on the floor. It's like out of a Quentin Tarantino film where it's like a slow pan of that American flag record cover looking at me. Like, that was the only thing I was concentrating on, hearing this bass line, boom, 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 boom. And the thing was, I never heard it afterwards. And then when I was like 11, maybe like 8, 9 years later, that song came on. I instantly froze and had a kind of a panic-stricken
like
moment.
a PTSD response.
Yeah, and I was like, I know that bass line. And
And my eyes hurt. I don't know why.
Yeah, and I became fully obsessed with that record. And then once I went backwards to research Sly's music, I was like, wait a minute. These first 4 records sound like the happiest albums on earth, but this one sounds different. Why? And the thing is that the more I became obsessed with the record, go to libraries, look at, get the microfiche films, look at every article ever written on this album, and all the critics were like salivating over it, like, yo, this is the funkiest album ever. And it's like the praise of it is like it's his masterpiece. It invented funk music, which, you know, that's the meat and potatoes of hip hop. Like, we all need funk in our lives. So they were just like, it's so funky. And I'm like, but do you not hear a person dying in real time? Like, this is his 27 club entry, except he's living. And everyone was like, I didn't see it that way. It was so relentlessly funky that I didn't see. So it was
like always visible to you in some way, what was behind it.
But here's a weird news alert. 10 years later, the same thing will happen. Check this out. Song 1, they're going to betray you. Watch your back, they'll stab you. Song 2, abandonment issues. Song 3, cop blocking song of a battle between 2 guys and a girl. Song 4, a whole bunch of monsters are going to eat you up. Flip to side 2, a gang war, paternity issues, existentialism, questioning of God, and the last 2 songs, abandonment issues. That's Thriller. But when you think of Thriller...
Oh, I see.
Right, see? Suddenly it's like, ding! Every song on Thriller is the most negative. Literally, Thriller lyrically is one of the most depressing. There's nothing happy about Thriller at all. It's full of paranoia, full of mistrust, full of but he makes the monsters seem fun. You know, he turns a gang war into West Side Story with the video. You know, the kid is not my son. It's denial of paternity. It's like literally. Thriller is such a dark record, but it's so distracting with the music execution and the videos and moonwalking backwards and all that stuff that we never once saw how dark Michael Jackson's lyrics are. All of his records are like that, you know? I mean,
yeah. And
so as a result, I just became hyper obsessed to know what happened in Sly's life between 1970 and 1971 that caused him to make a living suicide record.
Yeah.
I still consider that album his 27 entry. If you know about the
the artists who die at 27. Yeah.
And so that became my obsession. And then, of course, I find myself not living in the same parable, but, you know, reaching the promised land of a goal, a life goal, comes to you, and then you don't feel joyous at all, you know? And that's why, and people never believe me when I tell them that, you know, they're like, so what did you do when you saw what happened, you know, on air right before your award was given to you? And I tell the truth, which is basically, I wasn't even paying attention. First of all, I was in the back row. You know, it's like they put all the dweebs in the back, and it was the pandemic. They had to separate
everyone's
it.
far apart.
Yeah, so all the documentary and the wardrobe and the sound, you know, editors and all the dweebs are in the back, and all the celebrities are in the front. And if I didn't hear the word fuck or fucking, I would have thought it was just a bad sketch, but. About 10 minutes before that award was given, all the anxiety, like I was there trying to do TM meditation to calm myself down. Okay, you deserve this, Amir. This is an ongoing mission. You know, this is a good thing. This is a good thing. But then maybe like 3 minutes before, it became like just a avalanche of, oh man, no one's going to like me anymore. And, you know, Thanksgiving's not going to be normal, and Christmas is over. And, oh man, like I don't know if anyone's going to be happy for me. The band might be happy for me, but maybe the band won't be happy. And the winner is Summer Soul. And literally, it was just like, you know, and then just for 4 months, man, it was a lot of panic attacks and a lot of therapy sessions.
Yeah.
But I got it back together top of 23, more determined than ever to, once I had to go through it, then I understood what Sly felt like.
Yeah.
In 1970, once he became King of the Hill.
Well, and it's at the moment where you realize that it was also the story of so many other musicians. You said that too, like so many, the familiar story of like the highs and the lows. Like, was that when you realized how universal that story is?
Well, because I'm also part of the mob that's quick to judge, because I'm known for working hard,
Sure.
I might have a few jobs under my belt, so.
We could talk about that too.
Yeah, and so because of the fight or flight trauma of poverty that always sort of chases you in your mind, I kind of never looked at any artist I've ever worked with or any peer of mine that shows up late to a show, makes the audience stand around, doesn't do more than what's required, doesn't do extra. Okay, you're going to make music and be on a late night show and DJ and write books and teach at NYU and design clothes and sneakers and direct a movie and work in the food space. My thing is, like, if I could do it, anyone can do it. So I never had an empathetic disposition to that type of person. And then once you jump in the pool, then you're like, oh, okay, I understand it. And I felt this was the best way for me to get my point across, which is all my movies have that element, which is it's the common thing that most of my watching public will have in common, which is like, oh, yeah, I know this song because they sang it in Shrek, or I know the song because my mom likes it, or, oh, LL Cool J sampled that song and da-da-da-da. And, but it's what you don't know about it. And I use that, and I think I got good desired results. Probably four of my intended 19 kind of came to me and said, I felt seen, Of
the people you talked to in the movie, or the...
Well, here's the deal. So when we first did this project, the one thing that was done before anything was Sly did his interview first.
Yeah.
However, once I realized this was the film that we were going to do, then it was like, none of the questions I really wanted answered were being asked. He was asking normal things like, so talk about your days as a DJ and what were rehearsals like? And I mean, some things I like, but if you show that footage, then it's like, what happens when he doesn't answer a question about being late or what fear and anxiety he had? So because
you didn't do that interview, it was done before.
Yeah, someone did it
project.
before.
Got it. I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so, however, once we got our tools, our ingredients, as far as the canon that we received, and finding, if it weren't for like the 6 or 7 super fans, like what happens in the last 50 years is there's at least 6 to 7 fans that also are curious about Sly Stone's life that attempt to also make a Sly and the Stone documentary because there's nothing out there about him, and they only get but so far. But in their mission, like, someone will hand them, hey, I happen to have their first performance,
Oh yeah, all those tape or the video,
So a lot of that footage we had was kind of like, these aren't things that you can find in AP or any sort of like professional stock footage carrier.
Yeah,
of
it was like
Sly.
a video of them playing in a church basement. Is the first one, or the film?
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly. The Winthrop Cathedral. So That said, we decided to have modern artists speak of what it's like. Modern
Because
black.
you wouldn't have it from Sly, but you had people who had been through enough of a similar experience,
And that's,
Wayne. Yeah.
the thing is, with Sly's influence, also, there's a part of his influence of which those decisions are detrimental to your life and to your career that some of these artists inherit as well. Like, some inherit the songwriting talent and the ingenuity and the musicianship, but some also inherit the need to self-sabotage. And vulnerability isn't exactly vulnerability isn't our homeboy just yet. We're making very slow strides. I think after 2020, which, and I've been in therapy before 2020, but I got really serious about mental health like during the pandemic. And that was the bright side of, we were talking about, like, imagine laughing at the bright side of living through a dark period. Dark period is where you learn the lessons and where you grow, and you are somewhat forced to make serious decisions about your life. And for some of us, we make those decisions and we grow. A lot of us stay stuck in a place, and a lot of us kind of subconsciously and literally check out. And so there have been some no's. There have been some, well, I don't know much about Sly and the Family Stone, so I wouldn't be a good interview. And I was like, well, no, but just as an artist today, I want you to talk to me about what it is that you feel inside when a good thing happens to you, and then say, you might have a brush with the law or have to visit a hospital a few times for rehab. And for a lot of my intended talking heads, that level of vulnerability has just never been allowed or really shared. And so some agreed to do it and didn't show up. Some was like, nope, I will never do this. I will never talk about it, which is understandable. Like, I made this film for them. So.
The Ankler is supported by FX's Say Nothing. Based on the book by Patrick Rodden Keefe, the Peabody Award-winning series is a story of murder and memory in Northern Ireland during the Troubles. Following Dolores and Marianne Price, it explores the extremes some people will go to in the name of their beliefs and how a deeply divided society can suddenly tip over into armed conflict. Time calls Say Nothing exceptional and urgently timely work of political art. Awards eligible in all limited categories. Now streaming on Hulu. Well, there's you keep in the part of the film where you kind of pose the question and everyone kind of sighs and looks up and thinks like, oh my God. And then I think you said Andre 3000 is the one who was like ready to do it. But it does seem like everyone had thought about it. Like they kind of came because they were prepared. Like, do you really think that even if no one has articulated it, like this idea of the burden of genius is something that they have all sat with in their own way before this movie?
That is awesome editing. Each interview was somewhere in between. I mean, if it was generous, sometimes it'd be like a 2 or 3 day thing, depending on the age of the person, sometimes 4 hours. Sometimes it was 7 to 9 hours. To be honest, like it would take about maybe an hour of really breaking the ice.
Yeah.
Gaining the trust. I had to be very calculating and ask some light questions, and then, ask you a hard question, and then go back to light questions, and that sort of thing. And usually around like lunch break or like the first, like, all right, let's take 10, they would all say like, man, no one has ever asked me like how I feel. All your questions are, how do you feel about da-da-da? How do you feel?
Yeah.
And I it's on purpose because we just felt like oftentimes when you're a product, no one cares about how you feel. And as a result, I think it was jarring for some of them. Some were like, oh man, it's too much like therapy. We got to stop, that sort of thing. But,
you're like, that's the point. That's what I brought you here for.
Yeah. But I mean, I think D'Angelo and Andre really nail it. I mean, I wouldn't be lying to you if some of the women I requested, because, you know, we're not all, there's not a monolith. And I think that it cuts especially deeper for women
Yeah.
than it does for men. But you know, Shaka Khan was a great representation of it.
Yeah.
But for the most part, I put out feelers to at least 25 artists. And, you know, I'm very grateful for the 8 that granted this. But this was a very, and then some came back like, oh, okay, I didn't know it was like that. I would have complied. So
now that they see it, they see what's up too.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
It's the fact that you've made a lot of documentary projects. You've got a lot more in the future. You're becoming an interviewer. Right? There's a lot of other aspects of documentary filmmaking, and I guess I ask this as someone who interviews people out of curiosity. Like, what have you learned about how to talk to people? What keeps you coming back and wanting to ask people about their work when you've also made so much of your own? How does that keep fueling you in these projects?
So what was special, especially in having filmmaker Dream Hampton in the film. Dream Hampton is a legendary storyteller, and she will forever want me to just address her as filmmaker. But, you know, Dream is like a pioneering journalist, one of the very first like critical thinking, mental level hip hop journalists that we had. She was like one of the original source journalists, and I guess people noticed my knack for writing because I would use the Roots liner notes as my personal journals. So all of our liner notes for at least the first 5 records were almost box set size, like 30 pages of me just talking about how the song came to be and writing. So they're like, you're a journalist and a storyteller. Like, so she's the first person to hire me to write and to, you know, I've done many article in Vibe or Rap Pages or The Source and that sort of thing. I guess you could say once Questlove Supreme came along, my podcast, that was tricky because there were 5 hosts and 1 artist. And for the first 50 episodes, we're just like talking on top of each other, trying to land a punchline in.
I've tried that before. It's hard with 6 people on a microphone.
Yeah, like the whole morning zoo thing like that. So I'll say that maybe 4 years into Questlove Supreme, and this is one of the rare times in which I'll read the comments, and someone, I forgot who it was, but they were like, you know, I'm a fellow journalist, and I want you to take this, you know, don't take offense to it or whatever, but I want you to learn the technique of yes and.
You've known so many comedians, but the yes and is the root of it all.
Works. And like they'll say something, and then I'll go to the next thing, and they're like, you never get to the heart of it. So when they say something, let space go by, and then continue. And what else happened? And, you know, and then once I started doing that, I think doing the podcast for 10 years really prepared me for that. But I mean, to be honest with you, especially with how we did these interviews, we used, are you familiar with the Earl Morris process?
Yeah, the Interrotron, right? Where you're kind of behind the lens.
Right. I made it absolute, like, that's the one thing I wish I could have, damn. I mean, I guess we do have some footage. If we were in the DVD age where it's like DVD extras and all those things that we could show you, but the one thing like I insisted on was like, yo, when these people come in, I want them to feel like there's nobody in the studio in this warehouse. I want to see no gaffing people, no best boy, no key grips, no microphone, got nobody, like the makeup person, the grooming person, and the artist. And so for the most part, when they came into the building, it was almost the opposite effect. It was very stark and creepy almost, like the beginning of Thriller. You know, and then I'd walk them down like a very specific, it was like a homemade step and repeat, but basically it was like a kind of trail that only they could see, like just me and them, that leads them to the chair. And their eyes are totally or their peripherals and all that are blinded to what's behind the curtain. So even as they're talking, there's a giant curtain only offering a hole with the camera and me. So the whole time it just feels like they're talking to me.
Yeah.
And I tend to tense up if I'm doing an interview and wondering if the audio guy's judging me right now, or, you know, if the second camera guy thinks I'm boring or that sort of thing. So having the Interrotron there was key to just getting them to feel like it was just us in the room together.
Yeah. I'll say before we wrap, I think you joked that working on this at the same time as SNL 50 was like maybe a little bit too much work to take on, but it doesn't sound like you're going to slow down. So I guess you're going to keep up this pace for a while, right?
Yeah, well, SNL 50 kind of started as just, I was like, all right, I'll figure out the 50 best performances and do like the 50 best performances in 50 years, but it's 939.
Too easy.
Right. I would gotten roasted. Maybe about 4 months into Sly, in which there was a lot of darkness. And it's weird to say this because that would mean that Summer of Soul was light, which is weird because during the period that Summer of Soul was happening was the pandemic.
Yeah.
But I will say that compared to Summer of Soul, doing the Sly film was a thing in which I realized that, man, okay, I'll give you an example. On The Sopranos, there's a moment where Dr. Melfi has to see her therapist. And I was like, wait a minute, is it meta like that? Like a therapist needs to see a therapist of like, I give you my baggage. And I say this to my own therapist, like if she has like 5 clients a day, and I asked, like, if you do 5 clients a day and I know the baggage I'm unloading on you, and I can imagine what the other 4 are loading on you, how does that not affect you? Because, you know, there have been some times, especially in talking to Fun, Sly Jr., and Novena, you know, there have been some nights where I'll just go to a hotel and, you know, I might have to cry for a good half hour.
Yeah.
And again, like the darkness of, not the darkness, but just like, I got to talk to my therapist after this. It started to get super heavy. And so on weekends, watching SNL just became joyful. And then I watched so many episodes and I realized, like, wait a minute. Okay, the music performances are one thing, but this Adam Sandler song's hilarious. And then it was like, well, should I make a list of all the good moments and sketches with music as well? Because that's important. And then by the 6th month, then it's like, scrap everything. we have to give it the treatment. And so, but it became like my fun joy space because sitting with your heroes, and some of them have not gone to therapy, can be a jarring experience if you're empathic like that. And that's, I take in people's energy.
Yeah. I mean, I guess doing an interview about Dick in a Box is a little less heavy than some of the stuff on Sly. So the balance is
But here's the thing, though. Even in that lighthearted, in the beginning, I was just like, okay, well, I don't want this just to be a clip show. What's the common lesson I want someone to learn? Like, again, you come in thinking you know something, but what's the other thing you're going to learn? And it wasn't until maybe like the last quarter of us doing SNL that I realized that all the stories have one thing in common. A person's put in a vulnerable position in which they're given a task. And the one thing that they all say is, my first response was no. My first response was, I'm not having it. My first response was, man, you out your mind. I ain't doing that. But once they do it, then their life changes.
Yeah.
And I want creatives, I'm always thinking about creatives in terms of like, what lesson do I want you to learn?
Yeah. Thanks for listening to the special weekend episode. We'll be back as usual on Tuesday. This podcast is edited by Brett Fuchs and produced by Brett Fuchs and me. Our theme music is by Dave Gonzalez. You can subscribe to the Prestige Junkie newsletter at theankler.com and to this podcast on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. We'll see you next week.